I wanted to call this video Our People Are Robbing America or Our Thieves Are the Best. But then I realized that, well, we're not just robbing. And that's why the underlying message of this video will be about what emigration from the former USSR has given to America and what it stole from America. The same stream of people who fled from the same collapsed empire gave the world Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, and that same stream gave the world the organizers of the largest Medicare fraud in American history, worth over $14 billion. This is not a contradiction. These are two sides of the same story, which today I want to tell in full, without omissions, not turning a blind eye to either side. Because the truth, as usual, isn't in a single color, but in the mix of colors. I want you to watch a video now, it's only 40 seconds long, about how 324 people across America were arrested during raids by federal agents. They will be facing very serious charges. A significant number of these people are our former compatriots. Let's start with them, so to speak, and then we'll talk about everything else. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Gagliotti. I head the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice. Thank you all for joining us today as we announce the largest coordinated healthcare fraud enforcement operation in the history of the Department of Justice. Today is a pivotal moment in our fight to protect American taxpayers from fraudsters and to uphold the integrity of America's healthcare system. Today, we are announcing charges against 324 individuals for their alleged involvement in healthcare fraud schemes involving false claims, for a total amount of about $14.6 billion submitted to Medicare, Medicaid, and other healthcare programs.
A little later, I will tell you the story of a Russian writer who emigrated from St. Petersburg almost 100 years ago, whose name is known today. I don't know. Every American who is interested in the ideas of freedom especially knows her name, and she might surprise you with how deeply she is woven into the very fabric of American identity. But let's take it one step at a time. Emigration from the USSR and the post-Soviet space to the US happened, let's say, not as a single stream. I would describe it as three separate waves. The first was the Jewish emigration from the Russian Empire at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. They fled from the Pale of Settlement, from pogroms, from poverty, from the impossibility of improving their lives and breaking through to a normal life. The second was the Jewish emigration in the 1970s and 1980s when the Soviet government, pressured by the West, allowed Jews to leave, including those previously denied exit. First, there were about 50,000 Jews. Then the Kissinger grain deal happened, numbers increased, followed by those denied exit. These were, as a rule, highly educated people, engineers, doctors, musicians, chess players, who had no way to advance in the Soviet Union. It was blocked by state-sponsored anti-Semitism. And the third mass wave was in the 1990s after the collapse of the USSR, when people were leaving not only for ethnic or ideological reasons, but for economic reasons as well. Engineers, programmers, doctors, and even members of criminal organizations, let's be honest, who saw the chaos of the collapse not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. And it's exactly this multi-layered nature, three waves, different motives, different layers of society. I belong to the so-called second wave, if we classify it in the way I just described. And that's exactly what explains the final result. The contradictory nature of the final result. Well, let's start with the bright side, and believe me, it's huge. Sergey Brin. Moscow. He was born in 1973. His father is a mathematician. He couldn't defend his doctoral thesis or get a position that matched his talent and abilities simply because he was Jewish. The family emigrated to the United States in 1979 when Sergey was 6 years old. 2 decades later, he was already a Stanford graduate along with Larry Page. He founded a company that today is synonymous with the very act of searching for information on Google. They tell us, go and Google it. John Coombe, founder of WhatsApp. He was born in Kyiv in 1976. He emigrated to the U.S. with his mother in 1992, I think, when the Soviet system had already collapsed. They lived on food stamps in a modest apartment in, Mountain View. 20 years later, Facebook bought his company for $19 billion. Max Levchin. He was also born in Kyiv. He emigrated in 1991, practically at the moment of the collapse of the Union. He became a co-founder of PayPal, a company that, without exaggeration, changed the way the whole world pays each other money on the internet. This is not a random or isolated story. This is a typical trajectory for an entire generation, an escape from a system that stifled talent to a country where that talent could be turned into real results. The list goes on. Now, not just names from technology: Mikhail Baryshnikov, the legendary dancer; Garry Kasparov, Mila Kunis. She was born in Chernivtsi, emigrated in 1991, became one of the most sought-after Hollywood actresses. And of course, music: Vladimir Horowitz, Mstislav Rostropovich. But if we talk only about the stars, that means it's just the tip of the iceberg. And in my opinion, its most important part is what Soviet and post-Soviet emigration brought to America. It's not just individual geniuses, but a whole layer of a strong, educated middle class. Engineers who started working as programmers in Silicon Valley long before it became trendy. Doctors who, after retaking exams and validating their diplomas, filled the shortage of medical staff in entire regions of the country. Scientists who became professors at Princeton, Berkeley, and MIT. The statistics speak for themselves. Immigrants from the former USSR are one of the most educated immigrant groups in the history of American immigration. The proportion of people with higher education among them is significantly higher than the national average. And this is not an abstraction. These are thousands of small businesses, dental offices, accounting firms, IT startups, restaurants, and ateliers, which are founded by whom? By people who came with just one suitcase, without knowing English, and after 10 years became owners of their own businesses. So what did they do? They quickly sent their children to the nation's top universities. Brighton Beach, Forest Hills, Summit Park Hills, Sun Hills, Sunny Isles Beach in Florida. These neighborhoods were not built by a government program, but by the hands of thousands of ordinary families who did exactly what healthy immigration should do. They worked, studied, invested, including in their children. And within a single generation, they became absolutely indistinguishable from any other American middle-class family. Well, except for the slight or heavy accent of the parents, and, the pierogi along with Olivier's salad on the holiday table. The same neighborhoods like Brighton Beach and Queens, which produced thousands of doctors, engineers, and honest entrepreneurs. At the same time, according to federal statistics, these areas became known for having some of the highest rates of Medicare and Medicaid fraud in the country. The same immigrant neighborhood. Sources of doctors and organizers of fake clinics who bill for services that were never provided. How is this possible? Very simple. Any large diaspora is not a monolith, but a means of an entire society. With all its layers, including that small percentage which, in any country in the world, is ready to break the law if they see an opportunity, weak control. The issue is not about national character, but about systemic conditions that either open up or close off this opportunity. Gentlemen, I still have about 1.5 boxes left, which is probably around 30 unsold collections of short stories. As I mentioned, there were about, maybe 100 or 120 of them. And the ones I accidentally, so to speak, missed, I found they were hidden in the garage. Somewhere around, I think, over 80 have already been sold. I think the rest will be sold very soon as well. But if you want, then place an order and specify what you would like me to write on the first page. Of course, I will sign it. So maybe, Masha, happy birthday, from the author. Or, our armored train is on the siding. And my signature. So whatever you want, I will write, except for anything nasty or inappropriate. You will find a link in the description. And there, when you fill in the address while making a purchase, there will be an option to leave a message. In this message, write the name of the customer and the text you would like me to write. If you just want a signature, write signature, period, okay? The book costs $20, and the shipping depends on whether you live in the United States or somewhere overseas. Unfortunately, overseas shipping is quite expensive. Just in case, I'll repeat it. Send an email saying what you'd like me to write to rtfacomerton.global We'll write it below as well. Stories from my life. Well, they're kind of funny, I would say. At least people claim that they laughed. The first ones were probably written around 1973, and then, so to speak, one or two at a time, practically up to the present day. All of them have been published in periodicals several times, in many languages. One of them, Gubernland, included in his book under the title, The Story of the Unknown Soldier. The Unknown Soldier is me. Yes, so my stories traveled. They were retranslated from one foreign language into another. So it happened that my name would get lost along the way. Or it could change so much that I wouldn't even recognize it. So don't be surprised, like from Japanese, for example, right? If something you've read is either without an author or under another author's name and you suddenly say, "Ah, he stole it. I've read this before." In any case, I guarantee that this is from my own life. And I guarantee that part of it is true, right? I won't tell you which part. Really, that's it. Once again, the link is below. That's all. Let's get back to business. Now, best breakfast, the part of the story that got this topic into the news in the first place. Brighton Beach and Coney Island have been mentioned in federal reports for decades as areas with some of the highest levels of fraud, specifically with government programs, including medical programs. In February 2012, the largest no-fault insurance fraud scheme in U.S. history was uncovered there. The operation ran directly from Brighton Beach. Irina Shelikova, the owner of 3 clinics in Bay Beach, organized a fraud scheme for, how much was it? $77 million. She paid elderly patients kickbacks for their information, numbers, and silence. The investigation used a hidden camera right in her office. The sentence was 15 years in prison. Alexander Berman organized 6 clinics in Brooklyn, where employees paid elderly and low-income people cash just for coming in for absolutely unnecessary exams and things like that. And the clinics, in turn, billed the government. And how much was it? 26 million rubles. 10 years in prison. In 2011, I think, there were 360 federal agents. It was a major operation. New York, Miami, Detroit, Houston, Baton Rouge. Nearly 100 people were charged there in schemes totaling $250,000. Oh, I think that was per person. In one of the offices used for kickbacks, there was a Soviet poster hanging that said, "Don't talk." Looks like someone talked. In 2005, the story reached a whole new scale. Operation Gold Rush, the largest in terms of damages, the biggest fraud case in the history of the U.S. Department of Justice. Wow. A transnational organization based in Russia and other countries, through a network of front owners, bought dozens of medical companies across the country and submitted fake Medicare bills for, are you ready? $10.6 billion for catheters that no one ordered, no one received, using the stolen personal data of more than 1 million Americans. 4 of the accused were arrested in Estonia. 7 were detained at airports in the U.S. and at the border with Mexico as they tried to escape. And at the same time, a separate but similar case in spirit, Nikolai Buzylin Buz, I don't know. Well, something very similar to this. A Russian citizen organized a fake medical equipment campaign in Houston and issued invoices for, he was a big player, $400 million. And he was detained by FBI agents at Los Angeles Airport, already having bought a one-way ticket to Moscow. You should have bought a round-trip ticket. No one would have noticed you. Fool. But you bought a one-way ticket. He just wanted to save money. This same wave of emigration brought to America not only loan scammers, but also structured organized crime. According to estimates by the U.S. Department of Justice, there are about 15 Russian organized crime groups operating in the country, with a total of 5,000 to 6,000 members. The most famous is the Solntsevskaya group, and of course the Bratva, founded in Moscow in the late 80s. In the mid-90s, the FBI called it the most influential Eurasian criminal organization in the world in terms of wealth and influence. It was this group that once sent its own man, that's Yaponchik, Vyacheslav Ivankin. Ivankov was sent directly to Brighton Beach to control Russian organized crime on the east coast of the United States. It's important to understand this isn't a centralized Russian mafia with one headquarters. According to the Russian law enforcement agencies themselves, it's a network of loosely connected cells, intentionally organized so that the arrest of one group wouldn't lead to the exposure of the entire structure. Yaroslav Shilk-Loper, sucker. Shilk-Loper, a citizen of Ukraine and Israel, organized a fake brokerage structure that deceived American investors out of millions of dollars through a fraudulent trading platform. The victim's money was laundered through bank accounts in Ukraine, Georgia, Hungary, Israel, and the Czech Republic. It's a complete mess there. Ole Olenik and Alexander Yurchik, both Ukrainian citizens, managed a network of staffing agencies. Well, like temporary agencies, I guess. That's how I understand it. In South Florida, through which they laundered money and defrauded governments, extradited from Thailand. Each received 15 years in prison. Olena, I think her name is Oblomska, a Ukrainian woman, participated in a global pyramid scheme that collected $340 million from investors all over the world. Again, she was in Thailand hiding. She was caught there and extradited. If you find this topic interesting, give it a like. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next part. And if you want a more in-depth analysis without worrying about algorithms, well, join the paid subscription for $4 a month. The link will be in the description. It's important to say directly, this is not a unique trait of people from the former USSR. The same kind of stories happened with the Armenian diaspora back in 2010. The Mirzoyan group, Taj Endi, organized the theft of personal data of 1,000 Medicare patients and created 118 fake clinics in 25 states, defrauding the system of $163 million. Before 73 people were arrested, similar schemes have also been recorded among Romanian and Nigerian groups, each with their own specialization, from food benefit fraud to internet scams. Any multi-million group or diaspora inevitably includes a percentage of people who are ready to use trust, the language barrier, and the slow bureaucracy of the state system to their advantage. The question isn't which nation is worse, but rather how well the state machinery, the government system, can separate the wheat from the chaff. And here, it must be admitted, the American Medicare system was surprisingly defenseless for many years. That's because it was built on trust, not verification. And now the story I promised at the beginning, Elisa Rosenbaum. She was born in St. Petersburg in 1905. She witnessed the revolution and saw how the Bolsheviks expropriated her father's pharmacy. She saw the hunger and fear that the Soviet system made a normal part of everyday life. In 1926, she was lucky enough to emigrate to the United States. Officially, it was for studies, but in reality, it was forever. And she took the name by which the whole world knows her today, Ayn Rand. She wrote the novels Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. These works became not just literature, but almost sacred texts for an entire branch of American political thought. Individualism, the defense of the free market, and the rejection of state coercion over the individual. Today, her books are required reading for many American entrepreneurs and politicians, and she herself is probably one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. She was born in Russia, and she was shaped precisely by the experience of fleeing from a totalitarian system. This, in my opinion, is the best metaphor for our entire history. The trauma inflicted by the Soviet system. For some people, it turned into criminal cunning, and for others, it became one of the most powerful philosophical defenses of human freedom that America has ever known. If we honestly take stock, the answer is obvious. For every organizer of a fake clinic in Brighton Beach, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of doctors, engineers, scientists, musicians, and just hardworking people who came with just one suitcase and built a normal, honest, productive life, giving their children opportunities they could never have dreamed of, and which they themselves never had in the Soviet Union. Crime statistics make headlines precisely because they are the exception, not the rule. The law-abiding majority never makes the news, simply because they quietly go to work and live their lives. That's exactly why I want to end our conversation focusing on the light, not the shadow. The story of emigration from the USSR to America, despite all its dark episodes, is one of the most convincing illustrations that freedom works. Put a talented, opportunity-hungry person into a system where hard work translates into results, not suppressed by bureaucracy or fear, and in just one generation you get Google, WhatsApp, PayPal, world-class ballet, world-class chess, and philosophy that to this day inspire millions of people to seek freedom, not handouts from the state. Yes, there is trash in every big river, and turning a blind eye to it would be dishonest and unprofessional, but the trash does not define the river. The river is defined by its current. This particular wave of emigration had, and I am sure will continue to have, a current directed toward creation, not destruction. If you want to understand not just the news, but the reasons behind what is happening in the world and in our shared history as a Russian-speaking diaspora, then yes, subscribe to my second channel, Roadmap to Freedom. There I cover topics like today's, but in a more thorough and detailed way. The link will be in the description. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching until the end. See you next time.